And now let's get to the gist. So in today's session, we will have Lisa and Julia talking about navigating through the customer feedback. I will give them, I will allow them to talk now. And if you have any questions, anything, let me know through the chat and we can talk. Thank you so much. Lisa, Julia, please.
Hi everyone. Maybe we can just quickly first introduce ourselves and then I'll jump into the topic. My name is Lisa, or maybe if you've seen me online before, Lisa Mo, because there's so many Lisa Wagners out there, it's crazy. I'm a product coach with Codecentric. So yeah, I coach product people on anything product related during the day. And I'm really happy to be here to chat with all of you today.
Yeah, hi, also from my side, I'm Julia, and thanks, first of all, for inviting me today. I'm happy to be here. I have been working in success in the SaaS industry for about 5 years now. And yeah, excited to be here. Maybe just a little fun fact about myself. In my free time, I do free diving, so I like to call myself a mermaid. And actually tomorrow I'm gonna head down, and yeah, that's excited to be here.
That is so cool. I want to be a mermaid too, but I will just share my screen for now. But that should work as well. All right, I hope you can all see it. I think it's working. So we want to talk about customer feedback and how to navigate through the chaos of it, because sometimes there can be a lot. You've probably all heard about qualitative and quantitative data, interviews and data analytics. But if you don't organize all of your insights well, it can get overwhelming, and maybe you get analysis paralysis because there's just so much coming in and you don't even know which things to look at, when to look at them. So let's just kind of briefly look at, where does all that customer feedback actually come from? Some of it might come from teams that you work with, like customer success, sales, marketing. There might be some stuff that comes in through user interviews that you're conducting. Maybe you're working together with a UX person, a UX researcher. You might get extra insights from user tests with prototypes. Maybe you conduct surveys via email or in your applications. You have some user behavior tracking. And then there's also business intelligence, data analytics, and reporting. So you get a lot of data and feedback about how people use your application. And so we just kind of want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the relevant information, right? So if you'd ask me which one should you focus on, I will give a product manager's favorite answer. It depends. So what does it actually depend on? I like to kind of ask myself a few questions to make sure I focus on what's relevant for me in that moment. So first question is always like, what's my goal? And then also I look at like, what do I actually have available right now that kind of matches with that goal, what I want to learn about. Is there anything else I might need and want? So maybe I need to actually go out and get some extra feedback on something specific. And also, how can I organize it to then make it easier for me to get those nuggets, those gold nuggets out of those masses of feedback, right? Usually my overarching goal is that I want to make better decisions. So to do that, we kind of need to make sure we're focused on the parts that really work to help us make those decisions, and that also help us to create an information balance to help other people make good decisions. And if we want to create an information balance, we need to actually have that information. Customer feedback is usually just one part of the puzzle. We have to make sure that we also know our product strategy. How will you win in a chosen area? And what are the business goals that we're trying to accomplish? I'm not gonna like go deeper into these topics right now because they could be webinars on their own. There's a lot to say about those. Just wanted to quickly mention them, that they all have to kind of work with each other. Something that I have heard a lot is we should all be more data driven. And I personally actually tend to say, no. If we would only look at the data, at the hard numbers, we would miss out. Good PMs will look at the quantitative data. Great PMs will also consider the qualitative insights and their gut feeling. That's just my personal opinion. If yours is different, that's totally fair. But I think there's nothing wrong with trusting your gut sometimes. And because you often have read or listened to a lot of more qualitative data from interviews or other feedback that you got, you probably have some insights that will help you with your gut decisions that you might not be able to actually point out. So this is kind of where you want to get to that point where you can actually find those bits and pieces of your feedback that helped you in your decision making. So be data inspired, but also listen to your gut feeling. All right, so back to the chaos, right? If we have a bunch of incoming pipelines for feedback, it can become a lot really, really fast. So anything quantitative kind of feels a lot easier to handle. Anything that is large amounts of qualitative feedback can get pretty tricky, and you want to organize it somehow. I actually have a background in sociology, so I did have to spend some time learning about empirical data analysis and grounded theory, which you don't actually need to learn anything about, but it means just simply the discovery of emerging patterns in data. I'm not going to bore you with more detail of that, but there are 3 steps to it that I still use to this day when I look at anything that is more just like long form kind of content. So usually you start out with the raw material, and you want to break that into kind of chunks and be able to label them. In sociology, they call it coding, but generally it's just putting little tags on little chunks of your feedback to make sure you can kind of place them and understand them and start seeing patterns. And you draw connections between these chunks and group them into little categories. And when you have the categories, you can then kind of connect those and see interconnections between categories. There's often like a core category that everything kind of evolves around. And so you can come from like a really long form, maybe interview transcript, to having a bunch of labels that will then help you to very easily get back to the essentials. One really neat trick I have learned from the people at Voltage Control that I do use a lot now, because most of the time I do not work with full transcripts, because that just is so time consuming that I usually can't actually fit that into a day. What I do is I color code my notes. And that already also helps me to see, okay, are there areas where people are generally like happier and others where they're not? It's a very simple color code. The green ones are positive statements. The pink ones are negative statements. Yellow ones are neutral statements, and blue ones are insights. So things that I just kind of picked up on that are not necessarily in any of the other categories. And this really helps me to break down my data into chunks. So the first step from the raw material. When I do interviews, I usually take my notes later, but this is just for interviews. But also anything else that comes in as feedback from your colleagues, for example, because they usually, if they talk to your customers every day, all the time, they usually have a lot of valuable feedback to share with you as well. So if you have now everything is broken down, you add your labels and you categorize your insights, it's a lot easier to find the things to connect back to the problem you're actually trying to solve next, and to understand, okay, what's happening here, and how can I make my users' lives better and still reach the things that are, or like reach the goals that are important to the business. It's not super essential which tools you use. There are some that make it a lot easier for you. but it's really important to kind of have these little labels or tags or whatever you want to call them to actually find things again. And whenever you work on a new opportunity, you can actually go back, check your product strategy and find the insights, reread them, watch them, maybe talk to the customer again, especially if you're in a B2B context. A lot of the time you get information from sales, and then maybe you can reach out to that customer again. And one thing I have learned, I don't want to say the hard way, that would be a bit too much to say, is when people, especially colleagues, bring you feedback, there is a certain expectation with that. And it's easy also to kind of just hear one person say something and take it as a more general kind of feedback that everybody needs the specific feature or has the same exact problem. So it's still always on you to make sure if you have one piece of feedback, make sure you can somehow quantify it a little bit and also manage the expectations around what's going to happen next. I actually like calling my, like wherever I collect feedback, a feedback library, instead of just calling them feature requests or something like that, because it is a feedback library. Those are things that I want to connect to the things that are important for the business, because we do work in organizations and there's always the goal of making revenue in one way or another. So we need to connect those things back. And if we just run around and build the things that one customer might need or want, we're probably missing out on a lot of really cool opportunities. So calling it a feedback library instead of feature requests helps a lot with expectation management. And at the same time, I have found it encourages people to actually like bring you more feedback without just being like, this is the one only truth, and if you don't build it, then you're stupid. Luckily, nobody has ever said that to me, but but they have looked at me that way. So I don't know about all of your experiences with that, but sometimes it can be quite the struggle working with the feature requests and the expectations that come with them. So I just want to like very quickly give you my key takeaways. One more time, we do get a ton of different user feedback through all kinds of channels. It can be overwhelming, so we want to make sure we focus on the right bits and pieces to actually get closer to our goals, understand the opportunities better, connected to our business goals and product strategy. Make sure your data inspired, but also do listen to your gut feeling every now and then. And then use the 3 little steps to go from raw data by chunking it, putting some labels on it, creating categories, so that you then actually have an overview in your feedback library of things that you can easily find again, and then apply to whatever opportunity you're working on. And that is it from me. I'm gonna stop the screen share and let you get into detail.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lisa. That has been super insightful. And I wanna start off with something that you mentioned. And you talked about this puzzle parts, a lot of different puzzle parts that have to work with each other. And today I'm here to show you guys how airfocus can actually help you with putting together all those little parts that kind of then form this super cool workflow that makes it a lot easier for you to, you know, collect your feedback, to categorize, structurize the feedback, creating insights, and close that whole feedback and prioritization and road mapping circles. So I want to quickly share my screen with you and actually show you hands-on how you can do that. So give me a second to share my screen here. All right, so basically what you can see here right now is airfocus as a tool visualized. And as I mentioned, these puzzle parts, or I would also like to call them different building blocks that kind of build your workflow, your feedback, prioritization, road mapping, and delivery workflows. So at airfocus, what is really cool is that you can kind of build and stack the product yourself. So you can kind of build the scope of product functionality that you actually need, because there's different ways of doing things, and each product team has their different and individual ways of working. So that's the cool thing. You can really customize the tool, and you can customize it to your needs. So today I'm obviously going to focus on this feedback part today. So let's get right to it. This is how airfocus looks like when you log in, when you have created some of these workspaces. And workspaces are basically different places where you can set up workflows and where you can work. And in my case, in my scenario, I have created workspaces for my opportunities. I have a workspace for my tasks, and I have a workspace for my roadmap, including the initiatives. And I also have this workspace here that is specifically for my feedback. And I called this my feedback library, because I really liked what Lisa said about the wording about the feedback library, because it's not just requests. Feedback can have so many different forms, right? So there's different ways of collecting feedback, as Lisa already mentioned. And one is that I find really interesting, and that is really easy when you use airfocus, is collecting feedback directly from your stakeholders on your public roadmap. So let me show you. I do have a roadmap here in form of a timeline, and I want to share this now with important stakeholders, and I want to collect feedback from them. So what I do is I create a share link, and I actually have one created here already called Stakeholder Roadmap, and I just very easily share this with my roadmaps. I can also embed this on my website in an iframe, for example, but can also just send out the link to them. And the stakeholders, they can now access this roadmap of mine that I made public to them and visible to them. It's real-time updated, so they will always be up to date on what's happening on my side of things. And they can now also submit feedback. So this is the important part. They can either give us feedback to one of an existing items on my roadmap already, or they can submit a new idea. And we have this so-called Forms app to collect feedback and ideas where the stakeholders can add their feedback. So let's say I want to request a Facebook login. And I can fill in here some fields that you can decide for yourself, that people have to fill out or are optional to fill out, contact details and so on. You can design this form completely by yourself, and then you submit this feedback. And what this does is I have linked this form and this roadmap to my feedback workspace that I've just shown you before. And now, as you can see, this directly created an item, a feedback item in my feedback library workspace. So now I have this feedback item here. And the next step after you have, you can see I've collected a number of items in here that are already automatically put into their status, because as this has come in new, I have this in my new status. But then I can just move it on to an open or closed or assigned to me status and so on. But now the important next part would be to actually structure this, categorize this, as Lisa already mentioned. And there's a lot of different ways of how you can do this actually in airfocus. So We have a set of fields here that you can set up yourself, where people can fill in their company details, their contact details, and so on. But you can also create fields for labeling, for example. And I've set up label options to label feedback with options like improvement, or this is user experience, it's general feedback, or feedback, mobile feedback, and so on. And you can create any type of feedback options here that you want, and add more fields that you might need. So for example, I want to add a new field to categorize my feedback. So let's say it's going to be a single select field called feedback type, with different options like feedback idea, for example. Then one could be improvement. One could be general feedback. You can also attach colors to them. You can kind of create your own digital sticky notes by applying colors to those options. And now I'm adding that field, and you have one more option to structurize and categorize your feedback. So once you've gone through that categorizing process, you can go one step further and connect this feedback that you have collected with your actual roadmap and with your actual prioritization process. So how can you actually do that? We have an app that is called the Insights app that lets you create insights and link your feedback from the raw feedback to your items that you have already on your roadmap, or items that you might have in your prioritization process. So in order to do this, I add an insight here. And this is fairly easy. I just highlight the important part of the text that I have received via the forums app, and I have an option to search for an existing item in my Voom Video Opportunities workspace, which is my road mapping workspace that we have seen before. So let me just search. Maybe I already have an item on my roadmap that is that could be linked to that. Let me see. Yes, indeed, I do have an item. So I'm going to link this to my road mapping item, Facebook authentication. So now I've created this insight link, and when I click on it, I can directly access my road mapping workspace again, where my prioritization and road mapping happens. And I have created an insight from the feedback. I can access the feedback details here, and I can move on to the actual prioritizing of the requests that have come in, but also the internal items that have been added, and so on. And you could even go one step further and actually take this insights score, which basically is the number of feedbacks and insights that you have created, and make it influence your prioritization. So I don't want to go too much into details about this whole prioritization topic, but if you have questions about this, you can definitely reach out to me and we can discuss this in detail. But as you can see, here is some kind of framework that is also customizable, that lets you rate your items that you have on your roadmap or items that you have in your backlog. And what we want to do now is we want to make this customer feedback and these insights, we want to make that influence the prioritization on this right part. And I can do that by in my priority ratings app, just adding the insights score as a criteria in my prioritization, and I can actually weight this. So for example, like this, the actual insight score that I have received would impact my prioritization score the same way the reach does, or the impact does. So if I update this, you will see that if it loads, oh, sorry about that. I haven't yet added a maximum for the insight score. So let's say the maximum of insight score is 100. Okay, now there you go. Now I should be able to update this. Okay. And there you go. So now you can see that this insight score has moved over into the prioritization framework, and this number here, which is the number of feedbacks or requests that we have received asking for the feedback for the Facebook authentication, is now influencing our prioritization score. So this kind of brings this whole circle together, like from collecting the feedback, prioritizing your backlog, including the feedback, including the feedback that you have received from customers, from stakeholders, and basically moving your prioritization from being very internal to being more customer centric. And yeah, this brings me back to the feedback, so we can actually go back to our feedback workspace, feedback library, by clicking on the link. And yeah, let's say we have received more feedback about this Facebook login. We create more insights, meaning that this score will be higher, let's say 10, then our prioritization score would be high. It might move up to 100, which is a very high prioritization score. And then without going too much into detail about all the other airfocus functions, once you have prioritized, you can also get a great visual about the prioritization. You can define and see on this chart where are your quick wins, where are your don't do's, where are your strategic ones that require high effort, but also bring you a very high value. And then from that point of view, considering the priority score, priority chart, you can actually create a great roadmap, either in form of a board or a release plan that you can then again share with your stakeholders. So this brings everything together, and hopefully this helps you being more customer centric. And I also want to mention that this way of submitting feedback via the Forms app that I mentioned is not the only way of how you can actually collect feedback. So there's different ways, and let me just quickly show you how we can do that. So we're back in our feedback library now. Apart from the Forms app where they can submit feedback on your roadmap, you could also collect feedback by, for example, integrations that we provide you with. We have integrations with all of the tools that you see here. In specific for the feedback tools, we currently also have an intercom integration where it's super easy to just tag a conversation, and it then automatically creates an feedback item on in your feedback library. Or you can also do that via the Chrome extension that you can install. That lets you quickly add feedback to your workspace. And there's more integrations to come. Next, there's going to be a Slack, Zendesk, email integration. And I also want to mention that we are already working on a public portal. And this is going to be awesome. So it's going to be a super interactive place where your stakeholders, your customers will be able to submit feedback also, that will then again create a new item in your feedback workspace, and they will be able to provide you with feedback there, vote for stuff. So it's going to be even more interactive and help you with all of these different channels of collecting and categorizing feedback. So this is it from my part. Please reach out if you have more questions about any of the other features that I couldn't go into details about in today's session. And yeah. That's it from my side.
Thank you
Any
very much.
questions?
Thank you very much, Lisa and Julia. Yes, now it was so insightful, and I really like how it went from, hey, customers' feedback is chaotic and crazy and hard to organize, to this is a beautiful tool that will make everything look pretty and easy and make your life a little bit better, getting awesome results. So now is a time to do a short Q&A. We have first Uyen. Would you like to ask your question?
For sure. Thank you,
Thanks.
Marina. I just want to ask Lisa, so you mentioned a bit about quality versus quantitative feedback. And I just want to ask, like, how could you identify qualitative feedback?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I really make it very easy. If it's not numbers, it's probably qualitative. Like whenever it's, yeah, you can't really use percentages or actual numbers on it. And it's like actually a written text most of the time, or a video or some audio clip, or however you get those things, that's usually qualitative. Most of the time you have a lot smaller numbers of people giving you this type of feedback. So instead of seeing, oh, I have like 100,000 people looking at my landing page, you actually talk to 10 people or get feedback from 10 people through your colleagues in customer success, sales, or maybe marketing even, depends a bit on the setup of the company. And those I would just all kind of put together into the qualitative feedback bucket.
Does that answer your question? Yes. Yun Lee, are you still on the call with us? Would you like to ask your question?
Hi, thanks, Marina. So I think my question here would be, how is the roadmap status kept updated, right? Just now I saw, I think, Julia, you were showing us the integrations and whatnot. The problem that I've kind of had in my own experience working with like roadmap tools, like for example, product board, one of the examples is that like we have to spend a lot of time, or we had to spend a lot of time in updating the product board with new comments, new statuses, etc., and it took up a lot of time. So would you mind kind of like telling us a little bit more about how do you keep your statuses up to date, everything synced and automated as much as possible?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So basically, I want to give you an example of how we do it at airfocus, because I think it's the most straightforward way of, how you can keep things simple. And for that, I quickly want to share my screen again, so you actually see what I'm talking about. All right, so basically at airfocus we have a public roadmap, and it's really good to have a public roadmap to just keep your customers informed of what's happening, right? And everybody can access our roadmap from within their account or also from our website. And this is a very simple roadmap that you can see here. And it's fairly easy. People give us feedback here. You guys could also, when you start using airfocus, or when you already use it, when you have an idea or when you want to submit feedback, you just fill in the form here, submit it, and this will go directly into our product team's feedback workspace. It looks like more or less like my feedback library here, where they will have all that feedback in here, and then they will go into the new feedback. They will take a look. Of course, sometimes there is feedback that repeats itself, but that is actually really important. Like you have to keep in mind that repeating feedback is maybe probably more important than feedback that doesn't repeat itself. So there will always be some kind of manual work included, because you have to decide, okay, with what feedback do I want to move forward? Do I create insights from this? So creating insights, for example, is the manual part. So you would highlight the important part, click on the respective item, create the insight, and then apart from that little manual step of creating the insights, if you make your insights automatically influence the prioritization score, the feedback you will receive in here actually automatically influences your prioritization. And then the rest, the road mapping part, that kind of stays the same, but it automatically includes the feedback that you receive. And that's how we do it. It's pretty straightforward and easy. And to be very honest with you guys, we haven't done that always. I have started airfocus where we didn't do it this way. We haven't had a feedback tool back then, and it was so chaotic. We from customer success had the itty bitty job to kind of collect feedback from all of the different channels and collect it, send it to the product team via Slack or whatever. And this is just really easy. And the only manual part is to take a look, categorize it in the way you want it to be categorized, create the insight, and that's it. Gone. Feedback is in your roadmap.
Thank you, Julia. The next question would be from Jonas. Jonas, still with us?
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to ask because it's probably a bit similar to the last question. So we have also not just like all external sources somehow connected, but also kind of internal third-party systems and so on to kind of like automate something like company and customer data details and so on. We don't want to fill out this by hand all the time. So is it possible to kind of connect third-party systems which are already existing within the infrastructure?
Thank you for your question. I guess it's directed to me. And yes,
sorry.
So no worries. So yeah, quickly sharing my screen again. All right, so yeah, definitely. If you use the Forms app, for example, to collect feedback, like this one, you could, when you set up the Forms app, you could make the fields that you want to show in the Forms app, you can make those mandatory. So if a customer of yours wants to submit feedback, they would automatically have to give you their email or their company ID or whatever information you are working with, and when they submit it, you will automatically have it stored in the item as a company detail or contact detail or whatever.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next, we have so many questions. Next one is from Rob. Rob, you're still in the call with us?
Hello. Yeah, I was like wondering like how you work on the feedback that you get from customers and internals and externals for a B2C product compared to a B2B product.
I think it's quite similar, I would say. Most of the time you get a lot more. So because most of the time a customer base in the B2C space is a lot larger than in the B2B space. So you really need to make sure you're good at the whole organizing all of those bits and pieces of feedback. At the same time, even though your customer base is a lot larger, people often feel less compelled to give you feedback because they're just like, oh, I'm just one on many, and they won't really care that much. While if you have a B2B business, you might be a bit closer with your customers and they might actually give you more feedback. It really depends on the space you're in. If you want more feedback and you're not getting enough, then I would look into how to make it easier for people to actually give you feedback. If that's something that's stopping you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Christina.
Yeah, I'm still here. So my question is how to handle growing feedback libraries, because I'm working in B2C and I really have the issue to keep an overview, because getting loads of feedbacks from customers and colleagues, so it overwhelms me sometimes. So do you have any tips on this?
I actually get rid of older bits and pieces. I'm also like, I will literally go into a new project and be like, oh, let's delete everything in the backlog that's older than 6 months, because a lot of the stuff ends up in the backlog too. And people kind of start shaking, they're like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, no, watch me. You actually can. A lot of the time, the important parts and the good ideas will emerge again. There's no idea out there that is the best idea ever, and only one person has ever thought of it. And if you accidentally delete it, it will never come back. So I would just kind of decide for your use case, what's a good like half-life time kind of for your feedback. Also, how fast does your product change, for example, because if you're moving very fast, the stuff from half a year ago might actually not be up to date anymore, might refer to features and things that are not there anymore, or that have evolved so much that it's not applicable anymore. So definitely get rid of some of it.
Cool, that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And the last one we have for now is from Margaret.
Yeah, thanks. My question was similar to Rob's. So if you're working with your customer care team and they're receiving calls on a daily basis and people are giving a lot of feedback, do you then identify one customer care representative to be categorizing all that feedback and putting it in the tool? Or how do you make sense out of all of that? Because also you're not just supposed to act on it, because there's also the thing that sometimes customers will say something but they don't really need it, so you shouldn't rush into developing a feature for it. But just how do you categorize it when it comes fast and furious?
So I would always work together with the customer support or success team on kind of developing the categories so that they make sense to both of you. Because if you collaborate on creating those, the buy-in is much better and you both understand off the bat what's happening. And I think from what Julia just showed us, airfocus, for example, just makes it very, very easy for a customer success team to actually just be like, well, this should go into the feedback because I think they should know about it, right? Here you can just elaborate on that one more time.
Yes, definitely. And I'm in this right position that you're talking about. I'm in customer success. So what is really important, or what makes it easier for the product team, is really for us to understand what the issue is. So when your customer success is on a call with the customers, it's really important that they ask not what is the request, but what is the problem. I always ask what is the problem? Why are you asking for this request? And this helps enormously to be able to categorize the feedback. And then when you're on the tool and meanwhile you're in a call, you can actually, sharing my screen again for one more time, you can actually internally, me as a user of airfocus, I can just add feedback or submit an idea, depending if it's feedback or an idea. I can, meanwhile I'm in a call and I can fill in out the fields that my product team needs. So it's really important to align between product and success to, just know what to ask your customers that request something or that give you feedback. And it's important to talk with product and customer success just to be aligned and always ask why and what is the problem.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Margaret. Just this is last call for any other questions you may have for today's session. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure like we could forward them to either Lisa or Julia, and they could reply them at some other time. I would like to take a quick second to thank airfocus, our partner company that has brought these awesome speakers together with us today. You've seen how great this tool is, and if you have ever any questions, any needs, just let us know or let airfocus know. They will be there for you.